Good evening, everyone. Can't hear? Well, this is. Good evening. Can you hear me now? Louder? Okay. Third time lucky. Good evening, everyone. I'm shouting now. Okay. It's so wonderful to see so many old friends of Parivartan, and to see you all today has really warmed our hearts. Thank you so much for being here. Welcome. A very warm welcome to our speakers today. Dr. Prashantham from Welch, we are hoping he'll make it. He had to leave a little late from Welch, but he said he'll try and make it any time. So we are hoping that, fingers crossed, that he comes. Dr. Vasant Rao, the principal of UTC, is with us. Thank you, sir, for being here. Dr. Joseph George, who has the single honor of being connected with Parivartan, UTC, as well as MPA. So he's really a 3-in-1 package. And Mukti and Bosco, who've come from Hyderabad, and Dr. Mohan Isaac also. Thank you and welcome. What makes this day extra special is having Ashwin Welch and Peggy Welch with us today, the eldest son and daughter-in-law of Saroj and Carlos Welch, and their granddaughter Maya, who's the daughter of Arun Welch. It's been really an honor to have them here with us and to be here on this very special day. Because for us, Saroj and Carlos were truly special. And if it was not for them, Parivartan won't be here. We're also happy to have staff and committee members from Parivartan, past and present, and a warm welcome to all our special guests. Thank you so much for being here. We truly value your presence. And we're going to take off now. I'm going to hand over to Vivek, who's going to take us through the evening. We hope to have a nice time together this evening. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much. I hope you all had that time to catch up with everyone, get to put some faces to the names, meet old friends again. Our goal really for today was just a celebration. We had to find an excuse and find a way to kind of bring everyone together in order to celebrate Saroj and Carlos Welch. But what we thought we'd do for today is just for the next 1 hour or so, we've asked a few people to jump on stage and share some of their stories, their experiences. We've got friends, we've got family, we've got some colleagues who worked with Saroj and Carlos Welch as well. And we'd like to kind of bring it all together so that we all have an experience of what they were like. For some of us who have not been lucky enough to spend time with them, at least we thought this was our opportunity. So to start off, Reverend Dr. Vasant Rao, Principal of UTC, if I could I ask you to come up on stage and share a few words with us? We'll play it by ear.
Sure, thank you. That's the last one and it is done. Good evening, friends. It is indeed a great joy when I've heard that we are going to have this meeting and at UTC and to remember and celebrate the life of Dr. Carlos Welch and Mrs. Saroj Welch. I'm really privileged. And when you called me right in the beginning, I think when the attention is rapt, I enjoy this moment. It was during my BD days that Mana Vikas Kendra was inaugurated. And I was one among those who have attended the inauguration of Mana Vikas Kendra, a beautiful old architecture which was there where now the Chandran Memorial, that building is there. And of course, I was also taught by Dr. Carlos Welch. My memories and celebration is that with the inauguration of this Manav Vikas Kendra, a counseling center has added a new dimension to the United Theological College, which was hitherto not there. Then what was there? We were a theological college offering Bachelor of Divinity, Master in Theology, and Doctorate in Theology, and all these courses were interdenominational. What I mean with that is students who came to study were from the Christian background. They were from various denominations of the Christian church. Now, when the Manav Vikas Kendra, which is grown in dimension in times, has become a place where courses that were offered were for all people in the society. That means this counseling center where courses were offered were taken by people of all faiths and all religions. And for this institute, which was, all the time used to have only Christian denominations, it begins with students and candidates studying here from all religious confessions. That is a greater enrichment that has been brought by the efforts of Carlos Welch and Mrs. Saroj. And I want to proudly say that these students who have, or in other words to say, UTC because of their ministry has become the gateway to the society. Otherwise it's only a way for the churches. So we enjoy and we celebrate this movement that because of Carlos Welch and Saroj, UTC has risen to another platform of ministering here to the total society. Because the students who got trained here had gone back and have begun to give counseling to the society at large, which otherwise would have been only in a smaller circle. Today I want to say that this department has grown to that extent that we have got this counseling center in association with a university, that is Martin Luther Christian University in Meghalaya. So that means it has become an unstoppable institution, growing from heights to heights and from glory to glory, and taking this very important ministry of counseling to the wider society and wider world. I had my counseling classes from Dr. Carlos, but then apart from the formal learning, he had done a lot of informal teaching. We would walk, and then he would walk straight home along with the students, sit there, give them hospitality, and then chat. I think the classes that were in the classroom have superseded the informal conversations that we have had with him. Those were more impactful. And these chats have made a lot of perspectival changes and thereby a lot of transformation in the personality. Lot of students who had decided to get married had their marriage counseling classes there at their home. He would very liberally would lend his books to them to read and to educate themselves, particularly in the Indian context. That was very important, because in the Indian context you wouldn't want your child to be speaking to another gender and all of a sudden overnight you want that she or he has to be a wonderful spouse overnight. It's very complicated. But Saroj and Carlos did a great job with the students with the marriage counseling. Two things. After all these academic things, there are certain things that get stuck in the mind from their life. Carlos, whenever I had gone to their home, and I think they were in Vasant Nagar for some time and then Nandidurg. I think I went to both of these houses. That means you know how close I was. Not necessary actually, but it is because of their large-heartedness. What I enjoyed in the Vasant Nagar house was there was a big jula, a swing, where I used to go and sit. It used to be good to go out of the campus, number one, and to be sit in a swing and then, swing for some time. It used to be very satisfying. That got stuck in my mind. But when I visited them in Nandidurg, there used to be a beautiful photo on the wall. That photo was Saroj Welch's photo. A beautiful photo. It used to be hung on the wall. And I used to admire that photo. And once I asked, "Sir, what is this photo?" I mean, it was your mother's photo, obviously. What struck my mind was, in that photo, Saroj had long hands. Very long hands, unusual. Have you noticed that? Oh, he also has? Congratulations. A photo, we need to have a photo of his in UTC. That was very unusual. We have seen many photos, but that got stuck in my mind. And then I read about who has long hands. Only great personalities have long hands, you see. And that stuck in my mind. And that picture is there, and it is always will be there until I get your photo. Second thing, what I observed was Saroj ma'am used to be talking, but I vaguely remember, or I remember that she used to weave something all the time. All the time. She never lost even 1 minute. She never wasted. She is talking, she is conversing, but at the same time she's, what do you call, weaving or knitting? Yeah, she's knitting. I'm sure she might be knitting some nice sweaters and giving to poor children, poor families, poor people. So, this is what. So, friends, these things have got stuck in my mind, and they are very impactful and they are very powerful, and these memories go a long way in you yourself enacting in your own life in situations like this. So I praise God, and we celebrate the life of Carlos and Saroj Welch, and I deem it that God has given me this blessing to have been associated with them. UTC, Vasant Nagar, and there in Nandidurg, and we praise God for their life. And UTC is ever grateful to them what they have done here, and that ministry has been growing and growing and growing. Thank you very much, ma'am, for this meeting in celebration of their life, and thanks for this opportunity too. God bless you, and God bless us all.
Thank you, Doctor. Can I please call upon Dr. Joseph George from MPA, please?
This is okay. Malini, dear friends, Ashwin, Peggy, and all friends of Carlos Welch gathered here, I take this as a privilege to stand on behalf of Medico-Pastoral Association, Bangalore. But it will be unfair if I only start with Medico-Pastoral Association. I met Carlos Welch, Saroj Welch, 1987, when they joined the faculty of UTC. And it was my second year of MTH, and so I got 1 year training in professional clinical counseling, and which was a big beginning for me, because that was something very unique and different from all other teachers and centers across India. We were oriented into basic skills in counseling. Then that was very, formal ways, informal ways, as Dr. Vasant Rao said. Very different ways of learning from Carlos and Saroj. We were there for a get-together, maybe Christmas get-together, maybe 1987. There was a lot of guests at home. And one guest asked me, "What is your wife doing?" So usual Indian answer, no, my wife, she is not doing anything. Carlos asked me to repeat that sentence 5 times. And then he said, so I'm going to tell her, stop working from tomorrow. So I learned not to use that word, not doing anything, but homemaker, housewife, whatever is more profitable, important. And they have very, unique way of understanding, communicating with people. As Dr. Vasant Rao said, there is a kind of recruitability in them. And that is, anybody goes on campus, you sure that if you are on the way, either Carlos or Saroj will stop you and say, "Where are you going? What are you doing?" So this is what I call the recruitability of both of them. And very loving persons in the community here that we have experienced. So 87 to 94 they were on campus, on the faculty. Then they were with Parivartan for 2 years. Then there was a time Dr. Carlos and Saroj decided to leave India, but the global mission of the world, Methodist Church given them an assignment, and that was to train missionaries going to any other countries including India. And they were placed in Atlanta, the same campus where I was studying. They made a pact with Joyce not to tell me that they're coming. Joyce sent me some things, and Joyce was told the one Sarkar has come from India and they have a packet full. So I went to see the Sarkar in the next campus of the Canada School of Theology, Emory University. When I rang the bell, they opened the door. It was a big shocking surprise for me to see them sitting there as 1 year as a special assignment on training missionaries. So there was an additional year of interaction between me and them. In this UTC sapling, the year before, I have written about obituary for Carlos Welch. In that, I have said many things, personal, professional. What I am today is just because Carlos Welch and Saroj Welch, who are truly, genuinely my mentors in the field of counseling. So I join Dr. Vasant Rao in thanking God for them, their ministry at UTC. Now turning to MPA. The year they joined UTC, they began working with MPA in different capacities till they left in 1994. Here I am going to read a minute from a report by the secretary of the time. So I don't want to miss anything important, how much they have contributed to the Medico Pastoral Association, Bangalore. As soon as they came, 1987, they began to work with MPA. Both were as members and also members of the managing committee, both Carlos and Saroj. Together they worked to provide in-service staff training of various kinds. In-service staff training is a major task, and 87, 88 onwards, they have taken the task of staff training, team building exercises, peer group sessions, violence management, stimulation, psychotherapy, family therapy, and transactional analysis. Of course, that was their specialization, area of specialization. They were also certified teachers and practitioners. So the Reverend Carlos Welch always made himself available and willingly worked with the residents and hostelers at MBA. Our residents are people with mental illness in the process of rehabilitation, recovery and rehabilitation. And hostelers are a little more advanced level improvement, so they are able to manage themselves. And this is very important. Now, at times we find it extremely difficult to manage such things, managing residents and hostelers. And both Carlos and Saroj were in various committees at MBA, admissions and discharge, staff recruitment, programs, and building and program committee. These are all important committees standing even today. Saroj, on the other hand, made a very efficient secretary and streamlined the functioning of MBA during her two-term tenures. She was the secretary from 88 to 92. So a lot of improvement in the functioning of MBA brought by Saroj. Personally, they both conducted training programs outside MBA to raise funds for MBA. That is, the tier program, etc., they conduct and then raise money, and part of that money come for MBA, which is something that, very important for us to recognize. Also that there were sales, faiths, and the Meenakshi Sheshadri dance recital. That I only came to know now. There was a program like this, fundraising for MBA. Meenakshi Sheshadri dance recital, where Carlos Welch made a major contribution. They also helped to find an endowment fund for MBA through the Global Mission, which was their sponsoring body, and that is kept for the benefit of the staff at MBA. Now, there were many of the MBA staff, several of the counselors were diploma holders from UTC, that is the Diploma for Proficiency in Counseling. So there are different ways that they have contributed to Medical Pastoral Association. As we were together on campus, I always looked at them, their eager work for MBA fundraising. So they have done a lot of, ambassador job. Whenever there is visitors at UTC, they would say, we are taking you to MBA. Students were taken to MBA. Staff members were taken to MBA. And my initiation into MBA was also through Carlos Welch. When I joined in 92, he said, come, this is a place you should be associated with. So there's a lot of things that come from both Carlos and Saroj for the development of MBA, functioning of MBA for a longer period of time. And we are grateful to you. On behalf of the MBA, we can only pray, rest in peace, Carlos and Saroj.
Thank you, Dr. George. I'd next like to call Malini Sridhar, Executive Director at Parivartan Counseling and Training Center, to share a few words, please.
After those eloquent speakers, I think that I am a better reader than a speaker. So I'm going to read, okay? Some of you might know that when Carlos passed away in 2020, March 2020, we had planned to have a memorial service for him on the 31st of March. And it was planned, the hall was booked and everything was ready, but then COVID happened. And as I was thinking on that, I thought that maybe that was one of the good things of COVID, that we cancelled it, because I think it's just so fitting that we are having a joint memorial service of both Saroj and Carlos. They would have loved this, let me tell you. Because, we rarely say their names separately. If you've noticed, it's always Saroj and Carlos. And so I think it's so good that we are able to celebrate both of them today and with people who all knew them from the past. On one of his visits to Parivartan, Carlos shared a bit about the beginnings of Parivartan and how it started. He said he and Saroj were just talking to their large group of friends, well-wishers, which were made up of clients, people they had trained with, people they were training. There was a whole lot. And they just talked about saying, there's such a growing need for counseling in India. We need to have a place that we could train them. And the emphasis was on secular because, as you know, there was an image that anything with UTC was Christian, so they wanted to have this, something that people would find it easier to approach in case they had any reservation. And he said by the next day, they had 40 people sign up to support Parivartan, and many of them are here today. People who just came forward said, yes, we are with you, and we'll start Parivartan. And that's how Parivartan started in 1995. But soon after, Saroj and Carlos had to go back, and they had to leave because that was their assignment. And it was all the people they left behind, these friends and well-wishers who nurtured Parivartan. Not only they kept it afloat, they kept it afloat financially, they kept it afloat with voluntary services, both in counseling and training. And they really nurtured that young sapling that was planted. Saroj and Carlos's efforts didn't stop once they went back to the US. They knew that we needed, some kind of monetary assistance to get established. So they worked tirelessly, and they managed to get us a grant from the Women's Division of the Methodist Church. And so in 1998, they helped set up Parivartan, and since then, and put us on our feet really, and since then we haven't looked back. They always visited Parivartan whenever they came to India. That was a one visit that we could look forward to. And they conducted workshops, they met staff and trainees, they had tea on many occasions, and they were truly inspiring to everyone who met them. The seed that they planted and nurtured in the initial years has grown and matured thanks to the loving care of many gardeners over the years. Many of you are here with us. I can't stress that enough because, we are here not because of one person or two people, we are here because of the community that has supported us. There are too many people to name individually, but they did take great care of Parivartan. Since then, we have had many trained mental health professionals who are part of Parivartan Training and Counseling Center as trainers, supervisors, and counselors who helped us structure and build boundaries in the way that we work at our center. They also developed and added to our training programs, making us today, and I say this very proudly, as a referral center in India for anyone who's looking for skill-based programs in counseling. We have also been fortunate in having a very supportive and caring executive committee through the years to not only guide us, but have our backs as well. And I must mention Dr. Raj Bami, who stood with us and helped us in those early years and for many years after that. So where are we 27 plus years on? In keeping with the vision of Saroj and Carlos, who wanted counseling by trained professionals to become more accessible, counselors trained at Parivartan have started their own centers located in different areas in Bangalore, and we have one in Orissa as well. There are currently over 10 such centers at present, and we hope there will be many more as we continue to train ethically and professionally. Parivartan stands today as a tree well-grounded and with ever-spreading branches to provide shelter and sustenance to those who reach out for help, and as a tribute to our founders, Saroj and Carlos Welch. Thank you all for being here with us today to celebrate who they were and what they meant to so many of us today. Thank you.
Thank you, Malini. My apologies for that, for the screech that's out there. Please bear with us. Before we move forward, we've had a couple of people who couldn't make it for today's event, but some of them did reach out and tell us that they'd like to still share what they have. And they've handed over some over their writings to me, and I'd like to read it out verbatim if that's okay. So we have Usha Srinath and Dale Peacock from Atma Sakti Vidyala, who kind of asked if we could read out what they've written. I'll start with Dale first. This is what Dale says. My earliest memory of Carlos and Saroj goes back to 1985 when they would visit Atma Sakti Vidyala from Delhi and conduct training for us. What struck me most was that they made a good team and could very smoothly pick up and chip in for one another. I loved the stories that they would tell. Even these flowed spontaneously, keeping me enthralled and interested. The effortless ease with which they could communicate was more than impressive and stemmed, I think, from the depths of dignity and respect they had. First for themselves, which radiated thereafter to all other forms of life. Supervision from Carlos was always a unique experience, which I would look forward to. He was always kind and understanding and would guide me in such a way that I could identify practical ways to implement dimensions of counseling in a holistic way. I cherish fond memories of both of them and appreciate the rich legacy they have left for thousands of people all over the world. This is from Dale Peacock, the director at Atma Sakti Vidyalaya. I'll now read out what Usha Srinath had shared with us as well. This is from Usha. I was associated with Carlos and Saroj for many years. They used to guide the kids and staff at Atma Shakti Vidyalaya during Jackie's absence. I have attended many workshops in TA. Saroj was a mother figure. In UTC, she would open her hearts and hearth to a lot of us. She could address sensitive issues like sexuality, etc. comfortably in group sessions. I will never forget the support she gave us in Cochin when Hank had a heart attack and the whole community was shaken with insecurities. Ravi and Gulil also continued taking care of some kids after they went back. Saroj was a major source of strength and support to all of us, especially during difficult times. May her soul rest in peace. From Usha. I hope they are online and they're getting a chance to watch us as we are sharing these experiences of theirs. All right, moving forward. I see Bosco somewhere around. Thank you. Can I please ask Bosco to come in and share a few words? Bosco would like to be called a child of Saroj and Carlos. The family has been extremely close to Saroj and Carlos and would like to share a few words. Thanks, Bosco.
Hey, thank you. Good evening, everybody here. It's really an immense pride and honor to stand here today where to basically honor Papa and Mama, which is what we call them, Saroj and Carlos. And they were Papa and Mama for, the last count that I know of is for 432 children. And maybe many more, but from Papa's own mouth, before he was in the last stages of his life here, I happened to be with him in the hospital, talking to him about various things. And so I asked him a question. You have so many children around the world from the heart. Can you count and tell me? So he counted literally, and we ended up 432. And it's a privilege. Both Mukti and me call them both Papa and Mama. And it's, I don't know, it's from the heart, or we feel it's from the body and the blood that we had that privilege to share with them. I mean, many stories I can narrate for hours together, but for the lack of time, I'll shorten mine. Yeah, so we were among the 430 children of the heart, and Dada and Dani, and Dada and Dadi, to the many more grandkids, Auntie and Uncle to many more, and Saroj and Carlos to many, many more, who have guided us through the years. Both Mukti and me have spent possibly the longest time with them from among their 432 children from the heart, and I dare say here, possibly even their own kids from the blood, that we would have spent considerable amount of time with Papa and Mama, and we are privileged for that. Our lives took a huge turn when Mukti was invited to meet with Saroj immediately after our marriage, when she moved to Bangalore from CMC Vellore. We were both invited to their home at the UTC quarters for a dinner. Well, I was wondering why, if it is an interview for Mukti, why was she even inviting me to join her? Anyway, to cut the story short, we got to know that afterwards if she has to get to Mukti to join halfway home, she will have to feed her husband as well and keep his stomach happy, which they did, of course, not one time, many more times thereafter. That started our association as professionals with them in the year 1989. One led to the other. I ended up joining their counseling course of all the people and underwent my own personal journey with them, and few of our classmates are sitting here today, and quite happy to meet all of them, and it's quite emotional at the same time. And this was the place where we got trained. UTC was the ground. We put our counseling hat many a times and helped many of our own associates, our own people whom we were working with. Yeah, so we had our own personal growth, both Mukti and me, our married lives. Along the way, the relationship changed from Saroj and Carlos to Mama and Papa. Through the work that we did, and through the years. And we didn't let them, even though an occasion comes, they were going to Goa in a train. And so I was working, obviously, and Mukti was working. And they took a train from here to Hubli, and somewhere from there they were to drive. So we realized that what are we going to do without them? And so we took a train to following them to Goa, and they realized, these people, we haven't called you to be with us. Why are you following us? So wherever they were going, we were there with them. I don't know, by design, by whatever. We just were there with them for the good, for the bad, for the ugly, for whatever. We had to lean on them for many things. And in 1993, another incident was when our son Nishant was born. Luckily, he is here today. Saroj and Carlos were to leave for their annual vacation to the US. And this happened just before that, because it was a C-section, which we didn't plan it. So Saroj canceled her ticket and stayed back to be with Mukti during the delivery process, and giving the positive messages along the way, and how to even become a parents, because from the new married couple to even to day-to-day living was a challenge for getting to know each other, though we know technically 20 years before our marriage, but together living is a challenge which all of us have gone through that, I'm sure. But anyway, to cut it short, yeah, so she sacrificed, and Papa went on to the US. She stayed with us, took care of Nishant and Mukti while her mother was in the US, couldn't get back in time for the delivery. So just such was the support and sacrifices that they made in our lives, which we still feel grateful for. And we were also part of many events. A couple of them are coming to my mind. when it's a New Year party where Yasmin and Joe and along with a few friends visited Bangalore. We were, and at that time I was working for ITC. So ITC used to conduct a huge New Year parties, and so we took all of them. We were about 10 or 12 of us, along with Saroj and Carlos. And so they have a dancing competition. So we all participated, and believe you me, Saroj, Carlos got the best dancing couple. And the rest of us who were there, we swept all the prizes that were possible on that New Year. So the ITC was wondering who these guys are. They were never part of our company or anything. So it was a strange thing that I need to explain to them that they were from the US and these people are from here and so on and so forth. So that still remains. And after that, they never invited us for the parties. Yeah. The next event that comes to us, this was the last year of Carlos and Saroj that before they left for the US to go to Atlanta for their training, the trainers to get into the rest of the world to do the work that they have been doing. In the Lali's house, they have a party hall, so we conducted a New Year party there. That was their last New Year again. And Carlos became very emotional, and as he felt mounts of grief to leave India. As to him, India was home and is calling. It took many years to let go of their grief, even after moving to Atlanta and Baton Rouge, and made it a point to visit India every year until they could no more travel. And Ash was talking to me a few days ago in the US while in one of the travel to the airport to pick me up, that Carlos went through a course which a Spanish Catholic Church does. It's called Carcelo, and apparently he went through that, and during that time, if he could get through the grief completely of letting go of India. When I mean letting go, not in that strict sense, but that grieving process, he could evolve and come out of that. And so that's that much love and affection he had for the country called India, and the number of people that he has helped along with Mama, and many of us are witnesses to that events. Both Papa and Mama have been great support to us as a family, and Geetanjali, our doctor, again, we're lucky to have her today here, had the privilege of spending last 3 months being close to Dani, as she calls her, and attending to her needs, and learned many life lessons from her, which I'm sure she will put to good use as she grows to be a young woman. Fast forward to 2022, I had the greatest privilege of spending last few months nearer to them, both at home and hospitals, with Papa and Mama. Thanks to Ash and Peg, I could fly to Cleveland and Massillon, and stayed closer to Saroj the whole night as she breathed her last the next day morning, where Mary was sitting next to her. Hard as it was to accept the reality, but the way Mama left this world to be with Carlos and God Almighty was an experience to go through personally for me. She lived her life at her own terms and left the world at her own terms, as she decided that now it is to go and be the other side to receive all of us. And the way she planned and called each one of us to say her goodbyes, the most important life's message to all those who received her call in the final days was this: trust in God and mind your business. To Mukti specifically, she called just the day before, you are doing God's work, continue doing it, trust in God, and mind your business. This is what Dadaji, her father, told her before he left this world. Absolute peace personified and still glowing in her long sleep. I mean, I have seen many bodies. Her body, her face, everything was just alive and peaceful. Yet, another story comes to my mind when Dr. Billy Graham was in his 92 suffering from Parkinson's. He was invited for a program for honoring him. After all speeches were done, Dr. Graham gets up and said, I am reminded of Dr. Albert Einstein, who was traveling from Princeton in a train, and ticket conductor came to him asking for a ticket. So he looked at his coat pocket and pant pockets and he couldn't find the ticket. And the conductor told him, hey, Dr. Einstein, we know who you are and the people around you know who you are. I'm sure you would have bought the ticket. You don't need to show me the ticket. Right? So he went about, checked the other passenger tickets, and after reaching the end of the coach, before he entered the next coach, he looked back at Dr. Einstein. And Dr. Einstein was on his 4 legs, looking for the ticket under the seat. So he ran back and told, Doctor, you don't have to show me the ticket. We know who you are. So Dr. Einstein told him, Mr. Conductor, I know who I am, but I don't know where I am going. So Dr. Billy Graham continued after that, I not only know who I am, I also know where I am going. May your troubles be less, your blessings more. May nothing but happiness come through your door. Life without God is like an unsharpened pencil. It has no point. May each of us have lived our lives so that when our tickets is punched, we don't have to worry about where we are going to go. I know for certainty that both of them lived their lives and got their tickets punched, keeping God as center of their lives, and knew where they were going. I have no doubt in my mind. Both Mukti and me learnt life's lessons, not only how to live a full life, but also how to leave life from this earth, including our decision to donate our bodies to the scientific research, which is what we both have done. Mama and Papa, you both were there for us with a warm shoulder to lean on, to learn, to laugh and cry on through the good times and hard times in our lives, comforting us, taking us by our hands, and guiding us in small and big decisions. The small acts of encouragement enabled us to become what we are today. And most importantly, you gave us a family, made us more Welch, and given us siblings in your own kids, Ash and Peg, Yasmin and Joe, Ravi and Gunil, and Arun and Jody, and their grandkids. You taught us so many things, and as we miss you both, we hope to carry on your legacy and your spirit and the light in our lives with love and hugs. And again, hugging was learnt from both Papa and Mama. Last but not the least, Papa told me once, and this is again, he quoted Annie Frank, don't judge each day by the harvest you reap, but by the seeds you plant. Again, I am privileged to have been their loving kid, a son, and I was privileged to be with Mama and Papa close while they were in their last breath. I don't know how else I can say this. It's getting more emotional now, and I will leave at that. Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you, Bosco, for sharing that. It's not just your own experiences, but also your lessons learned from your mama and papa, and thank you for sharing that with all of us here. Next, I'd like to call upon Dr. Mohan Isaac, who's not just worked with Carlos and Saroj, but also a very close and dear friend of theirs. If you could please share a few words with us, please.
Thank you very much, Bosco, for those very touching and very detailed association Mukti and you had with Carlos and Saroj. Thank you, Malini, for asking me to say a few words. I first met Carlos and Saroj in 1973. That was at the Christian Counseling Center in Vellore. Those days, I had just finished my medical training in Bangalore. I was toying with the idea of specializing in psychiatry. Those days, in the early 90s, there was no department of psychiatry at the Bangalore Medical School that I studied my medicine. So many people advised me, why don't you go to CMC Vellore? Are you sure you want to do psychiatry? You work for some time in a psychiatry setup and then decide. So I decided to do my senior house job, and as many seniors advise, work in internal medicine, neurology, psychiatry, etc., and then decide whether you want to, because once you decide to specialize in something, then of course that is for pretty much the rest of your life you will be specialized, you will be working in that specialty. So it so happened that my late uncle and aunt, I am referring to Reverend Dr. K.C. Joseph and Anna Joseph. They had moved from Geneva. They were working at the World Council of Churches, and after a brief training in counseling, my uncle joined the Christian Counseling Center at Sayanadapuram in Vellore. And by that time, I had finished my medicine, neurology, and I had come to psychiatry. People who are familiar with Vellore would know that the Department of Psychiatry is located in a place called Bagayam. That is where the medical college is. The hospital is in the downtown Vellore, and Sayanadapuram and Bagayam are just walking distance. I was still not sure whether I would do psychiatry or not, and one of the books which my uncle asked me to read was a book written by Eric Berne. Many people know about Eric Berne because he wrote the games people play, and he is the father of transactional analysis and all that. But he is not very well known for another book which I read, which in a way influenced me. I decided to take psychiatry. It's a simple book called A Layman's Guide to Psychiatry and Psychoanalysis. So it was during one of these visits to Christian Counseling Center, my uncle introduced me to Carlos and Saroj as their, that is when I also met the very young Prashantham, who was the coordinator of the place. I hope he reaches here before. Oh, I'm sorry. You, Prashantham, I couldn't recognize you. I'm sorry. In my mind, I only have that young Prashantham. Thank you so much. It's a great delight that I'm able to see you. Anyway, I don't have to say all that now. You are here. That is where I met Carlos and Saroj. They immediately impressed me because I was still young, and they were also young. And they told me about what is in store in psychiatry, the field of mental health, mental illness, various kinds of things. I chose to do psychiatry. I moved to Bangalore. Then, of course, move forward. I finished my training in psychiatry. I joined the National Institute of Mental Health and Neurosciences as a faculty. In 1972, the Medico-Pastoral Association, about which our current president, Dr. Joseph George, spoke in, Carlos association with that association was started. It was signed. In fact, the MPA is celebrating its Golden Jubilee this year. I was very actively working, initially as an honorary consultant and then on the committee. And it was while I was the late Air Commodore Chaco was the president, I was the vice president. And it was in 1987, Saroj joined as our secretary. Her contributions, of course, Dr. Joseph George mentioned. I'm not going into the details of that. Carlos was somebody who was an honorary consultant psychologist for Medico-Pastoral Association. They have done lots of things. Mukti, of course, used to work at that time with Medico-Pastoral Association. Large number of other people in Bangalore and elsewhere were associated with Medico-Pastoral Association, while Saroj was the secretary, formal secretary, and Carlos was our advisor, our consultant psychologist involved in training of the staff, etc. Again, I'm not going to tell you anything more. I mean, many things have been said, but I want to say just a personal note. Those days I used to work in the rural areas. I wanted to develop the today, of course, you have a national mental health program in India. There's a training of primary care. There's a district mental health program. It's spread all over. Those days, there was nothing other than Nimans and few centers here and there. There was no mental health care at all. I believe even in many parts of India, that is true. That's what I heard from Mukti a little while ago. She works in northern parts of India, which are not as well developed as far as mental health care is concerned as the southern states. So I was working largely in a village called Sakalwara in Anakal Taluk, etc., training primary care doctors. At that time, I had no intention of working in WHO, going overseas, nothing. I was very keenly involved. And then suddenly, in 1986 December, towards the end, my director calls me. There is a telex message. Those days, there was no email, etc. Telegram, telex message, just 3 lines. You have been invited to attend a meeting of the, advisory, something of the World Health Organization, which will be held at the Institute of Psychiatry in Maudsley in London. So, director said, are you prepared? Do you have a passport, etc., etc. Anyway, what I want to say is that this January is also, I understand, very cold in North America and UK, etc. I didn't have even a jacket to wear. I used to work largely in rural areas. And I told Saroj, look, I have got this invitation. I have to go to London. I mean, this is a great invitation. My director says, you must go. This is an invitation from the World Health Organization. Now there's not enough time I have to get number of things, stitch warm clothes. Saroj said, at that time, I don't know, I mean, I was slightly taller than Carlos, maybe. He said, don't worry. You will fit into Carlos' jacket, clothes, warm clothes, etc. If you have no problem, I will get them dry washed and you come and pick it up. Of course, so I just want to say in one of the meetings I sat as Carlos Welch in his jacket, etc. That was, of course, the greatest, privilege that I had. Long association, I don't want to take any more time. I just want to end by saying one thing. As I was listening to various people, there is a word in English called nostalgia. Nostalgia, usually, I've been a psychiatrist for last 40 years. Nostalgia usually was not a very good word. It's old people, when they have nothing, they forget, recent things they forget. It was considered as one of the earliest sign of dementia. You start thinking about old days, and that is, of course, a symptom of dementia. You have forgotten recent things, you say your school, your college, etc. So nostalgia was even considered as a symptom of depression and melancholia. But today, nostalgia is considered as a very positive thing. It is said that everybody should spend about half an hour, 10 minutes, 15 minutes nostalgically thinking about past, and there is now research to say that it enhances your mood, it improves your things, etc., etc. So I was, while listening to Bosco, others, I was just looking at the definition of nostalgia on my mobile. Can I say this? Because nostalgia is not a very good word. Nostalgia is a feeling of pleasure mixed with sadness when you think of happy times in the past. That is what I have. I am sure that is what many of you have. And since the principal is sitting here of UTC, our association in Medical Pastoral Association, of course, Joseph George is the president. That is not the only. I just want to mention also about, incidentally, about the secretary from whom Saroj took over. And that was the late Juliana John, wife of the previous principal, Reverend D.C. John. So thank you, Malini, once again for giving me this opportunity to, participate in this celebration of Carlos and Saroj Welch. I understand that Ashwin told me that they went to Vellore, they put him in Bishop Cotton Boys School boarding. Of course, he is also going to have the 50th, the golden jubilee year of going out of. So it's a period of nostalgia, and let us celebrate the memory of Carlos and Saroj. Thank you very much.
Dr. Mohan, Isaac, thank you. Today, I think we can appreciate nostalgia. I'd like to call upon Dr. Prashantham, please. He's come in all the way from Vellore, rushed in just to join us here today, and he's made it just in the nick of time. Thank you for making the time for us. If you could please share a few words as well, we'd really appreciate that.
Dear friends, I do feel very nostalgic, as Dr. Isaac said, in the newer definition of what he gave us. To join all of you in paying tribute to Saroj and Carlos Welch. And it is so nice that Ashwin and Peggy and Maya are here for this occasion. I apologize for not being able to be here from the beginning, but however much I tried, after reaching Bangalore, that is K.R.Puram, it was not in one's hand what was happening. So I closed my eyes, hoping that the driver would think it is a helicopter and go somewhere, or that it would get transformed into James Bond car. But one way or the other I reached, thanks to Malini and Parivartan for arranging such an elegant function to honor these great souls who lived among us in different parts of India, pan-India. I want to confine myself to two sets of thoughts, very, very briefly that too, because I realize that I'm perhaps, because I came late, I was given an opportunity at the end, and I don't want to delay you. But you will permit me to mention to you an analogy of what I'm going to say. It is like the story of a teacher in a class or a student in a class, where the teacher asks the students, next Saturday, January the 7th, let us say, you are to write a 5-page essay on milk and bring it. Some of you may know this. And when that day came, the teacher went round looking at the assignments and found that everybody wrote 5 pages, but one fellow wrote only 1 page. So she questioned him, why did you write only one when all wrote five? Which means that I communicated well. If they also didn't write, I would have thought that perhaps I didn't convey properly. Everybody wrote, you only wrote 1 page. Others wrote 5. This boy never expected to be caught and didn't know what to say, and feared that if he didn't say anything, teacher might think he deliberately wrote only 1. So he realized that his survival depends upon standing on his, thinking on his feet and saying something sensible. So he said, it seems, teacher, I wrote only 1 page because I wrote on condensed milk. So if I'm going to finish in 4 minutes, you should understand that I am telling you condensed milk about Carlos and Saroj. And they used to, see, my comments are personal and professional, my experience of them. Personally, they used to tease me because they found out that I was very young when I joined there, 23. They were in the 40s. Fortunately for me to have senior colleagues, mentors. But one day I mistook something else for condensed milk. So whenever they see me, they would remind me of condensed milk. And we used to have a great laughter. So moving on personally, they were very cordial people, very sincerely friendly to one and all, young and old. Strangers or known people, extraordinarily hospitable. Dr. Isaac must have experienced that, and as all of you may have experienced that. Best dishes made in South and North, you could find them, and they made them. And Carlos made such terrific jalebis, you Ash will remember. And their children, Ashwin and Yasmin and Ravi and Arun. Lovely, responsible, friendly, and we got along so well. We used to call Ashwin as Ashu Bhaiya. He was the first one in the family, so they all used to call. We also used to call him. And we enjoyed their company whenever they came home from Bishop Cotton's. And we were almost like a family, basically. They were very much involved in my marriage proposals as well as in final choice also. And accompanied us to the church and acted as my wife's family because her parents couldn't make it on time due to visa problems. She was from Sri Lanka. And so there were many, many marvelous memories of working together in this old building, which was where CMC was born, incidentally. That is where Ida Scudder started the CMC hospital as a 1-bed dispensary. So it had a history of 200 years, now 250 years. A legacy of God's grace and His faithfulness when people who recognized the call for serving God through serving humanity. And here, this center starts in order to promote mental health and well-being. And therefore, I want to first and foremost and most importantly, pay my personal tribute as a younger colleague of senior Carlos and Saroj, whose presence was very important for us in the first decade of the Christian Counseling Center. And so I brought 2 garlands to remember them. I want Ashu and Peggy to come and take them. This is from me and the Christian Counseling Center. Why don't you wear it in the name of your father? And so see you both. They were engaged in our apartment in Columbus, Ohio. Yes. So nice. Please accept this. So now I'll make a couple of comments professionally. We are meeting in United Theological College, which was the venue where some discussions about the formation of Christian Counseling Center took place prior to it starting when Dr. Russell Chandran was here. Theologians also met and discussed. See, this was stimulated by the visit of Dr. Frank Lake, the director of Clinical Theology Association in England, who was invited by the moderator of the Church of South India at that time, Bishop P. Solomon of Dornakal, in order to sensitize the church to the need for counseling, as traditional ways of telling people how to be, what to do, didn't work. Already suicide rates were peaking. Tensions were emerging. Stigma about mental health was preventing from people to make use of even the meager resources that were available. And without considering that, the future is not going to be wholesome and holistic. So this awareness was developing. In fact, UTC was the first theological college to even offer pastoral counseling. So the concern was there already. In the same way, CMC Vellore chaplaincy department was also offering courses under Reverend Women, AC Women. So they were also greatly concerned about this. That is, how to promote holistic well-being and mental health and well-being. So in this constellation of factors, Dr. Frank Lake inspired this meeting here that there should be a counseling center. And Bishop Leslie Newbegin was entrusted with the job of organizing it from the Church of South India. He was the deputy moderator. So he and the Church of South India felt it should not be a CSI affair, it should be an ecumenical. It should be for the whole country, for all the people. So they collected others. So as an ecumenical society it was formed. CMC also joined. So with this kind of a conglomeration, they were just around that time, Carlos Welch, who started in Batala, I believe, in Punjab, were moved to Jabalpur. From Jabalpur, he came to CMC as the deputy dean of the chaplaincy. Reverend Women was the dean. So when Dr. Frank Lake, who happens to be the former medical superintendent of CMC in 1948, and Bishop Newbegin joined together and talked to the authorities, They felt excited. They said, if you are going to form something, let it not be part of CMC, let it be independent, but we will collaborate for field work. We'll get free service, they will get free training. Win-win situation. So, they even appointed a director for this center at that time, called Dr. Theodore Pillai. Carlos was to continue in the hospital and give part of his time to CCC. So he was a faculty member drafted, along with Reverend Women. That is what the first minutes of the Board of Directors shows. Even the first pamphlets that were printed showed like that. But the day before joining, Dr. Pillai said, I cannot join because of some personal reasons. So now what do you do? So the board somehow, in their perspective, felt Pillai should be replaced by an Indian director. So requested Carlos, who was already drafted as a senior faculty and enthusiastically supporting, along with Reverend Women, from the CMC side, to be a caretaker in charge till the board appoints the new director. So around that time, I returned from America after 3 years of training, which I went on my own, and I wasn't aware of CMC and all that, but I was aware of Bishop Solomon, who told me before I went, I'm inviting Dr. Frank Lake for this very purpose. You go and come, but there was nothing more than that. It was a passing thought. I was very young. I was inspired on my own from my life experiences and my studies in psychology, where I was a gold medalist, to further study counseling, because though I was a gold medalist, I had no skill. That was the fate of our education, or state of our education. So I went to Chicago and Texas Medical Center, Houston, finished. And then I saw an advertisement from Bishop Newbegin. Christian Counseling Center is being formed. We want staff. If you are qualified, apply. So that's how I applied. And I was invited to come for 1 year because they didn't know whether it will go on further or not. It was all new, exciting, pioneering, and Carlos and Saroj were pioneers. They were there. And so, to make a long story short, I was invited to come. So on June 18th, 1971, age of 23, after my studies in psychology and advanced training in US, I returned because I wanted to work in India and develop something of my vision, dream, of a skill-based, competent counselor training, not theory that won't lead to helpfulness. So I was so happy to be asked to come and join, and June 18th, I remember, I went and met Carlos and said to him, Director, I'm Prashantham, I'm happy to join you. You tell me what I should do. He said, first thing I want to correct you, I'm not the director. I was shocked. He said, I'm only a caretaker in charge till the board appoints an Indian director. It can be tomorrow, it can be next year. So I'm temporarily in charge, but I'm happy to receive you. And you know, to be a caretaker is more difficult than be a regular one. That showed his capability and humility and commitment. And he kept on treating me like an equal. I was somewhat impressed by his age and experience and competence of both Saroj and Carlos. So you learn from your patients. How much more do you learn from your seniors? So he also saw my motivation, commitment, passion, and independent thinking. So within a few months, the board met and asked me, Bishop Newbegin asked me, give us your vision. I gave. Within another 2 months, Newbegin calls me and says, I'm happy to tell you we found the new director, the regular director. I said, I thought it was Carlos because that's what I was most comfortable with. He was such a amiable person to work with, encouraging, supporting. He said, yes, we found, and that is you. I got a shock. Reverend Casey Joseph was also there at that time, and he's as old as my father. He was also an extraordinarily supportive person. So they wanted somehow a younger person to take on and build it up over years. So I went and told Carlos, I'm very unhappy. I'm not accepting this. So Saroj and Carlos made me sit and counseled me for the next 3 hours. They said, why is it that you don't want to accept? I said, this is ridiculous. I don't have the experience. They said, the board has seen what you have, and therefore I urge you, I told you on the first day, I am not the director. So you are going to be the director. And I and Saroj, both of them told me, we are happy to work under you. And for 9 years, they worked under me as the director. But we got along so well. It was a relationship of collaboration. And I was so fortunate to have such senior people taking on such responsibilities with such dependability and competence. They were very popular among students, visitors, patients, and everybody. But, unknown to me, this kind of a situation happened, but for their encouragement, I would not have accepted. And they supported me throughout their stay, and after a decade, chose to go to Delhi, then came to UTC. We kept in touch from time to time, less frequently than when we were there. And we had very good common understanding and consensus on most matters, such as the need for experiential training. That is more important than mere theory. Competence matters. Holism matters. We also had very animated discussions on important issues of counseling, such as, is counseling too individualistic? Are we avoiding the social dimensions, systemic pressures in Asian, African, and Latin American countries? Or are we only overly focusing on the individual like in the West? What is a critical, appropriate, balanced perspective? Second thing we discussed was, are we catering to the elite? What happens to the poor and the needy? I raised even questions about cultural sensitivity, because today we are talking about cross-cultural psychiatry and counseling and so on. It's so easy to read Western books and impose it on our people. It requires intellectual clarity, depth, in order to perceive the differences and adapt and balance and develop our own indigenous forms, such as now I speak very extensively on counseling as a non-violent tool for social change, to combine with individual change, so that the pastoral as well as prophetic perspectives are covered. So these are some of the higher level issues we used to discuss. And so now we cannot think of all the places where very good work has been done, and without remembering Saroj and Carlos. Whatever be their role, name, designation, this, that, and the other, they were really pioneers and real shepherds, if we should use a theological term, for their teams, the stakeholders who trusted them, and therefore, professionally also, there's so much of thankfulness, gratitude, tribute that I would like to pay on behalf of the Christian Counseling Center, on my own behalf, and my family also, my wife who is no more, and children. They used to be so attached to them, like a family. And so, friends, I've spoken more than I expected. It became more than condensed milk. So before you throw me out of the podium, I will myself volunteer to come down, and want to once again express my thanks. Please convey to sister and brothers when you meet them, and pay a visit to Vellore and see in our heritage room. There are pictures of Dr. Joseph, Reverend Welch, and Saroj, and Bishop Newbegin, and Dr. Frank Lake, and all those early teams and pioneering members. We had just celebrated the Golden Jubilee and remembered Carlos and Saroj as well. So, Happy New Year. God bless you.
Thank you, Dr. Prashantham. I know we've had a long evening, and I would like to ask you to just bear with us for a little while longer, because we thought we'll end the evening with the family sharing a few words. We'd like to start with you, Maya, if that would help. And maybe after that we can have Ashwin and Peggy jump on and share a few words as well. Thank you, Maya.
Hi, everybody. This is a little intimidating for me to be speaking amongst so many incredible pioneers in the areas that my grandparents really devoted themselves to, and also to be speaking ahead of some of the most incredible orators that I know. So I just wanted to share some thoughts about, my memories of them. My understanding of Saroj and Carlos is somewhat different than the other shades that have been shared this evening, because I met them after their time as trailblazers and leaders. I never knew them as dancers or equals or mentors or friends. I knew them as my grandparents, loving and kind always. Sometimes my understanding of them feels incomplete. To me, they're like mountains who can't be wholly seen from my diminutive, childlike vantage point. So when I was in 6th grade, I was given an assignment to document a hero in my life, and I chose to interview my grandparents. The interview included questions like the chosen subject's favorite song. In this case, it was the hymn, "Here I Am, Lord," to relationships that they had with their parents or any of their significant influences. Dadi told me about her father's priority on education, Dada told me about his father's intentions for him to go into the medical field. Dadi told me about sitting in Gandhi's lap and telling him that she would be a social worker. Dada told me about his Aunt Celie, a black woman who would lay the groundwork for his commitment to social justice. Dada also told me all about his early call to do the Lord's work in India, and then Dadi told me about the Hindi lessons that she gave to him to prepare him for this, and then the inappropriate hand-holding at the beginning of their love story. I took these stories and I made a scrapbook. For every page, my mom helped me to sew tiny saris and make little paper suits with perfect tiny buttons down the front to represent what I saw as their blended life. While I did not get to meet them in most chapters of their incredible stories, I did not get to see them change the world while they were over here. I get to meet them every day on a path that they set me on. Nothing in my life is untouched by their hands. I moved to India 5 years ago to explore the world and meet the people that they loved so much. The foundation of the work I'm privileged to do with Mukti was set by them and their understanding of education and agency. I met my partner weeks after telling a friend that really what I was looking for was someone to set the same table that my grandparents had built. Almost every day I hear Dadi's voice in my head asking about my decisions. Is it loving? Is it kind? A question that she posed to me many, many times, and I'm sure many of you. My answer is not always yes, but I think that's part of what learning to live in their shadow is like. The lessons and expectations that I learned in their home appear to me in unexpected ways as I pursue a life molded in their image. And I know that I'm not the only person for whom a relationship with them created a commitment to love in action. It's really not possible to reflect on their lives without mentioning the incredible, massive, extended family they created, many of whom are here now. Once, when meeting a new friend of theirs, Dadi introduced me as their granddaughter, and that friend replied, "Well, how did you meet Saroj and Carlos?" Because she was so used to being introduced to sons and daughters and granddaughters and grandchildren who had incredible stories of the first time that Dada and Dadi had shown them kindness and compassion. I did not have that kind of story. Instead, I have memories of being a bit possessive of my very popular grandparents. One of Dadi's favorite stories is a time when she was braiding a dancer's hair on a stool in front of her, and I came up and pushed the young woman off the stool, claiming, "No, I'm sorry, that's my Dadi." Luckily, I've learned to share, and I'm very happy for the community that I was able to grow up in. I love that every day a new person would drop by at 4 p.m. for tea time, that most times I would come home, someone else was in the bed that I thought I would be sleeping in, and so I would have an air mattress on the floor of the living room. And at Christmas, we always had to pack a couple of extra presents because there would always be unexpected additions around the tree that we would need to share, Christmas spirit with as well. I love how they taught us to say, "I love you" as much as possible, along with "love you more," "love you peacock," "love you muchly," "love you fish," on and on and on and on until someone finally hangs up the phone or leaves the house. The impact that this intense, unconditional love in a forever expanding family is hard to understate, especially if we start with the hundreds of people who call them Mama and Papa, Dada, Dadi, Dana, Dani, and then we expand to the people who consider them mentors and teachers and colleagues. We're, likely in the thousands for those who have been directly impacted by their teachings. Then we add more who didn't directly absorb the wisdom from their home, but who passed on that warmth to someone hungry who needed it in their lives. And as we extend that to those who then offered a seat at their table, I think that we can quite easily estimate in the millions for people whom they have impacted. That's quite a legacy that we have the privilege to share, and I think a responsibility to honor. I will leave you with a note I wrote in a notebook 15 years ago that I've corrected somewhat for spelling and grammar. My grandparents dedicated their lives to helping others. I can't remember any time I spent with them when people weren't constantly streaming through their home. They came to talk and get help for their problems. People flock to my grandparents because they can feel the pure light and want to get closer. I am so lucky that the people who have healed so many wounds are always there to heal mine.
Thank you for that, Maya. Very touching. And finally, Ashwin and Peggy, if you could have a few words from you.
I'll try this one. My name is Ashwin Kumar Welch, and my father told me when I was very young that I am Indo-American Project number 1. I want to thank each of you for being here today, for Malini for organizing this, for Dr. Vasant Rao and Dr. B.J. Prashantham, yes, in whose home Peggy and I were engaged to be married, and for so many of you for your kind words for my parents. So many of you have known him for years, Dr. Joseph George. I don't know, couldn't name each of you, but so many of you we heard about. But I do want to have one man stand up for just a moment. Rao Sahib, would you display the sweater you are wearing that Mama knitted for you? Thank you. Rao Sahib Inamdar, who has been a supporter of theirs because they supported him long, long ago. So how did it happen that these two people are being honored today? We're going to tell you some stories about them that go way back. Carlos was born and raised in Louisiana. Louisiana is a state in the southern part of the United States of America. I was born in Ludhiana, which is amazing to me that Louisiana is nowhere near Ludhiana, and yet it was God who made that happen. Born and raised in Louisiana during a time when the world, that part of the world was divided by color. Carlos was touched by God to look beyond the color of skin. He was inspired by God to see the hearts of people as they were. At the age of 12, he had a vision of Jesus Christ. And fortunately for me, and perhaps for himself, he did not tell me about that until I was much older and able to appreciate what he went through. In fact, he didn't tell many people. He told his Sunday school teacher, and she passed it off as a childhood fantasy. But he had a pastor who supported him in exploring that vision of Christ through the book of Luke and finding out about who Jesus is. Carlos came to know Jesus, not just to know about him. And that transformed his life. When about that same time, at church camp, he met a missionary lady from the U.S., from India, who was a doctor visiting the U.S., and she challenged him to consider living and working in India when he grew up. Carlos looked at her and said, "Not me. I'm just a paper boy, a boy who hands out newspapers." And she looked at him and said, "But God has big plans for little paper boys." And he never forgot that. He then went on to do very well in school. He was also what we would call a gold medalist in this society, a straight A student in the U.S. He helped other students, and because of his help of students of color, he decided to leave Louisiana and travel to the north to become a pastor in order to be able to work as a missionary in India. That early age of 12 formed in him the call of God in Jesus Christ. And he found himself in Chicago area, Evanston, at Garrett.
Sarojini Makwan Welch was born in Gujarat. That's why she had a swing. Wherever they lived, they had a jula, because Gujaratis loved a swing. She was the second of 4 children. Carlos was the third of 12 children. She was, in her family, she had 3 brothers, boy, girl, boy, boy. She produced boy, girl, boy, boy. One wonders at the grace of God. Her father had a passion for the education of girls, and he wanted her to be an independent woman, and she certainly was. Her mother was a homemaker, and superb homemaker, who was a social worker at heart, and set an incredible example for Mama. And so she was also a cook and a knitter, and able to create the kind of hospitality that few people can. In our Christian terms, she identified with the story of Mary and Martha from the Bible, working very hard to balance both in her life, the scholarly life and the life of the Spirit, with the homemaking and emotional part of life as well. She was so independent and so good at that part of life that in her early 20s, she not only completed her degree at Isabella Thoburn College, but she was sent off by herself from India to Chicago to study and earn her master's in social work. Now, her parents prepared her very well. They gave her very strict instructions that she was not to fall in love with an American. But not only was she not to fall in love with an American, she was from childhood a follower of Gandhi and wanted to devote herself in social work to the people of India, and so she had vowed to herself that she would never marry. 432 children later, we know differently, don't we?
She needed some help with some of her psychology classes, and Carlos had already seen her on his first day in Chicago and decided, thank you, Jesus, she's the one I'm going to marry someday. You have sent her my way. So he offered to teach her psychology as long as she would teach him some Hindi. On the shores of Lake Michigan, they sat one day, and Carlos was learning in a Hindi tutoring class from Saroj. And they got to the relationships. In Hindi, you know, each relationship has a different word. Mother's older brother has a different name than mother's younger brother, and so forth. And so she said, older sister would be Didi. You can call me Didi. And Carlos said to her, I have no intention of ever calling you Didi. She was quite embarrassed by that, but she didn't forget it. When her studies were done, Saroj went back to India. She came back here and started her first job working for Brother Stanley. E. Stanley Jones had started the first modern psychiatric hospital in India. It was called Noor Manzil in Lucknow. She had the job of being their first director of social work at that new hospital. She was there for 3 years, and during that time she waited for Carlos to come. Carlos, meanwhile, finished his studies and waited in the US. He was vetted by the FBI to make sure that he was not a communist. He fought against the prejudice that was there in the US. But you see, Saroj had already won over his parents and fought the prejudice that they had against her initially for being a person of color. Now it was Carlos's turn, and 3 years later, he came to India.
When he arrived on the ship in Bombay, Saroj was with her aunties. And she was very worried that he would try to hug her. So she went on board ship. And he had already exited down a different gangplank. But every purser and employee on the ship knew who she was. Why? Because the painted picture of Mama that people have seen on their living room wall was displayed proudly in his room, and he had bragged about her to everyone on board ship. They had all seen the photograph. So it was he on the shore who greeted her as she walked down the gangplank. They went on to marry, but only after Carlos was approved by the family. He arrived in Jabalpur, where Saroj's father was the dean of Leonard Theological Seminary, and sat down to a magnificent meal provided by Sarah, Dadiji, with all of the crystal and china and silverware laid out beautifully. But he pushed it back, and he took off his shirt, and he said, "I will eat with my hands. I am at home now in India." And so it was that even from his first moments here, he adopted India as his home country, and Indian customs and lifestyle for his very own. We've heard much about their work, and it was profound and important and touched so many lives. But more important than their work was the way they treated people. Mama kept a little sign on the window in her kitchen that said, "People may not remember your words, but they will always remember how you made them feel." They didn't teach, they lived. They lived their values. They lived their belief system. They lived their faith. And in their retirement, Maya, they have much to teach us about living. Retirement lasted 20 years for them or more. And their lives were so balanced that they were an excellent example of how we also should live our lives. I had the privilege of living with Carlos and Saroj for the last 2.5 years. They were living with us, Mama was living with us, but I was living her schedule, which balanced beautifully the spirit, the body, and the mind. She would yell and rant at politics on television, but she always watched the news and she always read her newspapers. She would get terribly wrapped up in her favorite soap opera, and also in the lives of all of those 432 children and all of her natural family, cousins in England and India and everywhere. So the emotional life was important to her as well. And they always exercised. We've met people who saw them doing yoga on the roof of their house in Bangalore. They were swimmers. They valued caring for the temple that God has given each of us. And so they kept all those factors in balance. And we're just now learning also that this incredible balanced life leads to joy and peace and grace.
I suppose we could go on all evening and tell you some of the stories, like the time when Mama delivered a baby on the train between Chennai and Katpadi.
Or the
No,
time
really.
that she chased a plastic gun seller away from Gandhi's tomb because even toy weapons shouldn't be sold around a figure of peace.
Or the time when Carlos went to a tea party and the president of the college looked at him, didn't recognize him as one of his own faculty members because Carlos was dressed up in a sherwani and pajamas, and he also had a turban on his head. And the president looked at him and said, "Who are you, sir?" And Papa said, "I'm Carlos Welch, your professor of New Testament." And he said, "Oh, Carlos Welch, I thought you were some distinguished gentleman." And we
Or I could tell you the story of my first meeting with Saroj. Ash and I were working together in a facility. He was working, I was doing an internship, and we had become quite close and were spending a lot of time together. Mama came to visit because she was on the International Board for Transactional Analysis. And she met me and she took out her calendar and she said, "When can we do your engagement?" Nobody had proposed at that point. And she said, "I'm coming back in August. We could go to BJ Prashantham's and have the engagement there." And she came back in August. We did the engagement. And she took out her calendar again and said, "You're coming to Bangalore July 1st next year, and you're getting married there." She was self-controlled. And when she saw a need for direction and management, she stepped into the void, or we would never be married.
And of course, living those 3 years in Ghaziabad when Peg and I were there and our second son was born there, people would always ask us, "Is your marriage a love marriage or an arranged marriage?" And we would both answer,
We fell in love, and Mama arranged
our
it.
marriage. Yes, you see, for that phrase that she told for so many people, and especially in the last 3 months of her life, she said over and over again, "Trust in God and mind your own business." She was very good at
one of
the
those
two
things. She was a social worker.
Saroj and Carlos will be missed, but their legacy goes on. Their challenges to us is not to dwell on the past, but to remember that they have taught us so that we can move on into the future.
After
Yes?
Papa's death, the phrase that Mama used most often to people was, "We remember him with joy and thanksgiving." And so today, we remember with joy and thanksgiving 2 extraordinary lives.
On behalf of my siblings, Yasmin and her husband Joe, Ravi and his wife Goodhild, Arun and his wife Jody, on behalf of the family, I want to thank all of you for being here. And I invite you now to pray with me, a prayer that we use in a service of celebration of life as we celebrate the lives of Sarojini Makwan Welch and Carlos Alvin Welch. Let us pray. O God of us all, your love never ends. When all else fails, you still are God. We pray to you for one another in our need and for all anywhere who mourn with us this day, as we remember the lives of your beloved disciples, your children, Saroj and Carlos. To those who doubt, give light. To those who are weak, give strength. To all who have sinned, grant them mercy. And to all who sorrow, give them your peace. Keep true in us the love with which we hold one another. In all our ways we trust you. And to you, with your church on earth and in heaven, we offer honor and glory. Raise them up with all your people, and receive us also someday to join them, to praise you in your new kingdom of heaven. Help us so to love and serve you in this world, that we may enter into your joy in the world to come. Into your hands, O merciful Savior, once more we commend your servants, Saroj and Carlos. Sheep of your own fold, lambs of your own flock, sinners of your salvation. We thank you for all with which you have blessed us even to this day, for the gift of joy in days of health and strength, and for the gifts of your abiding presence and promise in days of pain and grief. We praise you above all else, and thank you for Jesus, who knew our griefs, who died our death and rose for our sake, and who lives and prays for us. And as he taught us, so now we pray, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who sin against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, the glory forever. Amen. Grace and peace be with you.
Ashwin, Peggy, thank you so much for that. We couldn't have closed this on a better note. With that, I want to thank everyone for being a part of this celebration of the life and the legacy of Saroj and Carlos Welch, Mama and Papa, Dada, Dani. And as you all are heading home, all I have to say is stay safe, trust in God. Thank you, everyone.